All right, so with our handsome Mr. Bodie, we're going to warm up a little bit with some lovely loose leash walking. So I know right now he is obviously off of gear. So right now we're just going to capture all these great moments where he is by the side, be it left or right. Um, I know you guys were mentioning that, of course, adolescence is upon you, and he is at times having a little bit of a harder time with novelty. So, again, super normal. I would always recommend that whenever your babe is, again, feeling uncomfortable, and what most people would think is we need to have more of those experiences to try to make them feel better. Remember that if your dog is saying, I'm struggling with something, and which means that they're getting more verbal, so like they're making a lot of noise, oh my gosh, chooser, maybe they're getting really disjointed and very unable to focus. So remember that whatever your puppy is rehearsing, they're getting good at. So this doesn't mean that through exposure and your puppy's barking and lunging, will they finally start to not bark and lunge if we never show them what to maybe do instead, or how to help them feel more comfortable. So a lot of these moments with adolescents kind of having bigger explosions is that since their body and their mind are under construction, we're just doing some find it's for fun while I'm blabbing, but since their body and their minds are under construction, what ends up happening is their ability to regulate their emotions are not as fine-tuned as they could be later down the road. So just like when we were younger, we might have felt really big emotions towards something, and then later we completely changed our mind on that thing. So, but at the time, it felt really urgent, it felt really real, and we had to have that thing or feel that way. So for your puppy, if they're really struggling with, excuse me, like let's say, should not be drinking seltzer, I'm sorry. Let's say they're struggling with new person poking out of their house, or maybe there's all of a sudden an animal in the woods, like off in the distance, and they notice like the bunny. There could be times where their ability to come back from something like that may not be attainable. So when in doubt, as opposed to letting them fizzle over or melt into a puddle in that situation, is when in doubt, create movement and also try to create more space between them and that thing. So if for right now, hanging out in your yard is plenty for him to see and then get a little flustered, I know we discussed this a little bit prior too, is have him practice from your yard where the fence is down by the bottom, and then work your way out to the driveway section. Oh, you don't stay in his mouth. Out to the driveway section, and then from there, do a little bit of almost like we used to do in the reactive dog class for his other sibling, where you'd be able to kind of be out in the deep end for a little bit and sneak back into the shallow end. So we want to try to work our puppies well under their threshold, because flooding them with information or flooding them with situations where they feel out of control and nervous, we're not helping create better associations. We're more than likely actually creating more of that response for later. And then my neighbors are doing some banging, so we'll have some real world distractions. So we're just working a little bit with this loose leash walking with orientation back to me from the environment. Nice. Bodie, here. Yes, good job. And a couple little recalls here and there to get him back over to the side. So right now we got some great banging. They're doing something. And that can be a great moment for puppies to hear novelty and not have it be too stressful. So you'll see he now finally noticed. Yes. So remember, like I was mentioning a little bit earlier for Miss R, is you cannot reinforce fear. So if, let's say, Mr. B got a little bit startled and I went into doing a find it for him, like I did a little bit earlier with Miss R when she saw the truck, is I'm not feeding them for the response, I'm feeding them for redirecting onto the better option. So that also can start to create a better association. So if, let's say, the banging noises equals fun, chewing is still optional, but let's say the banging noises equals fun buffet time with the crazy snack lady, then from Mr. B's association, that seems like the banging might be just another fun thing out in the distance. So it's a great way to slowly expose your puppy to items. So if, let's say, your dog was very sensitive to sounds, I would not go on the Spotify playlist, which again, I don't have my phone on me because it's right there. But I would go on the Spotify playlist, and they have dog desensitization playlists. This does not mean if my dog is scared of thunder, do I pick thunder, play it at volume 30 and like get them over the thunder sounds. You would also not play it that loud and then instantly just feed them as they're melting, because it's not going to create a good association. So remember, we can also what's called poison our cue or poison our food. So what I mean by that is I was mentioning a little bit for Miss R earlier, Miss Rubes. So let's say she was on her dog bed, but whatever's going on around her is really overwhelming. She's going to think being on her dog bed is now the precursor to the bad thing happening. So maybe working a stay with a place behavior is the bringer of the bad. So that can happen to dogs outside. You're constantly saying, sit, stop, stay, whatever it might be, and here comes stranger danger. And now as they're being stuck in a sit stay, they're feeling really trapped, really overwhelmed, and sit stays become the precursor to lose your mind. So you can ruin cues or your skills, and you can also ruin food. So I know I had mentioned real quick earlier for Miss R is remember recall practice. If I were to call my dog to me and then I go and do their toenails and they're terrified of their toenails, and even though you might be working on it slowly and building up some trust and maybe even hopefully working some cooperative care, I would still not recommend to call their name and then pair it with toe time, or call them and work your recall word and now you pair it with clipping of their toenails. Because now the next time we try to ask for a recall, they may think that's spooky, but then also if we try to lure them with, let's say, a hot dog to get them to go into the bathroom to then go give them a tub, the next time you try to lure them with food, what did food equal last time? Tub of doom. So we want to be careful that how we're using our food and how we're using our skills, that we're not by accident creating the negative association combined with that. Nice job, sir. So we'll do another little find it there, and then we'll go back into working some loose leash walking again. Ready? Nice. So again, bring it back to easy peasy. So if your puppy is having a really hard time with their adolescence, I wouldn't recommend to make it where you go and do the hardest adventure or the hardest dynamic to see if they're going to get better. For right now, if your puppy is already at a whisper from his perspective saying, I'm having a really hard time, I wouldn't keep pushing. So right now, we might actually have to lower the criteria, make it seem easier, and build up from there. I know Miss W says, I would really like to wrestle, she says. She wants to wrestle with somebody. So for the beauties, they are doing a stellar job. He's like, oh my gosh, I hear her singing. Good job. So they are doing a really nice job engaging with each other. Ready? Nice. So you may also find that after day school as well, just like if they do other programs too, your babes are going to also need a little break. Remember how important sleep and sort of rest periods are for your puppy, both mentally and physically. So if your puppy is also not getting enough rest, they're more than likely going to have a shorter fuse, be unable to focus. They're more than likely going to be overly exuberant and overtired. So sometimes people think, oh my gosh, my puppy has so much energy. We need to do this and this and this to get them tired. And what ends up happening is we're either conditioning the dog to become, chew them, sir, to become very physically fit, but mentally very unfulfilled. And then you need more and more and more physical activity to try to burn out that puppy. Also, you're also potentially hardwiring their brain to think when you get really jazzed and overwhelmed, you have to do more of that behavior to finally feel like you're getting over it. Oh, good. He found the snack in the crack there. So he's like, I'm going to get that bad boy. Maybe later. So, but we want to do a happy middle. So experiences that involve physical, but also mental, and kind of combining the two. So because if it's only just physical, your puppy may become maybe injured. Because if we're only doing physical activities, your puppy might push too hard even before they're ready. Because remember, your puppy takes about a year to a year and a half, depending on the breed, to even 2 years, like Mr. Teddy, is probably going to grow for another 2-ish years. Because he is the St. Bernard, Great Pyrenees, German Shepherd mix. So for him, his growth plates, ligaments, and bones will not be really done until about 2-ish. For some of the smaller dogs or medium-sized breeds, 18 months or so, give or take. So you will have to sort of gauge your activity level based also on what is your puppy giving you for their capacity mentally. So if, let's say, Mr. B is really struggling with doing an outing that is longer than 15 to 20 minutes because his attention span is only about 5, stick to 5 and under. So lowering the criteria and being flexible in your training plan is a stellar way to help your puppy when they're having a harder moment. So for my puppy, he was having a really challenging time through adolescence, and his overexuberance and woohoo for life turned into more frustration, and then it looked like reactivity. So for a lot of teenage dogs, depending on their breeds too, will struggle with big emotions, all of them, but then how they react to that will vary depending sometimes on their breed. So some will become more mouthy, some will become very vocal, some might start to mouth and use their mouth to try to make things wiggle. So depending on what your babe is doing well or not so well with, just always bring it back to the few steps prior to where they were being very successful. Bodie, here. He says, drinking water and chewing snacks, it's all very challenging. Yes, good job. But for Mr. B, we'll give him a little breather from this. He was doing a really nice job with that loose leash walking, and of course some gorgeous little recalls and working a little bit with those find its too. Good job, sir. So we'll give him a little breather, and then we're going to work a little bit with that place behavior again, just see how he's rocking a bit with that stay. But really good job for Mr. B today.